All right, moving into section 1, the requirement of consent, what the text actually says. Okay, so here is our very first direct piece of evidence from chapter 4, verse 19. It says, "O you who believe, it is not lawful for you to inherit the women by forcibly or unwillingly." The absolutely crucial point is right there out in the open. The text doesn't just, suggest that force is a bad idea. It explicitly, definitively outlaws it. Making it not lawful carries immense legal gravity. It means that any marriage based on force or an unwilling participant completely lacks legal standing within the framework of this text. The individual's agency is totally front and center here.
And what's really brilliant is how deep this requirement actually goes. It definitely doesn't stop at the wedding day. The text extends this strict need for consent into highly sensitive and complex situations, like divorce and getting back together. The rules regarding the end of a marriage dictate that once an interim period is reached, women cannot be hindered from remarrying, provided they mutually agree with their partners in a kind and equitable manner. Let's look a little closer at the specific verses that detail this.
Take chapter 2, verse 232. It instructs others, "Do not prevent or hinder them that they marry their partners if they mutually agree between themselves in a kind or equitable manner." This is just fascinating. Even after a divorce, the text vigorously protects the woman's absolute right to marry the partner she chooses. The deciding factor isn't the family's permission, and it's sure not societal pressure. The real deciding factor is whether the two individuals mutually agree. And this requirement builds even further when we talk about a divorced couple getting back together. Chapter 2, verse 228 says, "And their husbands would then have just cause to return together if they both wish to reconcile." Now, I really want to draw your attention specifically to that phrase right there, "if they both wish." A husband cannot force a reconciliation. He doesn't have some unilateral power to just reinstate the marriage on his own. It requires the active, willful agreement of the woman. Both parties absolutely must desire the return. Let's move on to section 2, the language of mutuality built into the Arabic. Take the word tarada. In the original Arabic of the text, all examples involving decisions between marriage partners use reciprocal word forms exactly like this one. Tarada means mutual agreement. So it's not a verb where one person is doing something to another person. The grammar itself literally requires two active, willing participants. The linguistic structure of the text physically does not allow for a one-sided imposition when it comes to marital decisions. How cool is that? And here is another really powerful example of this reciprocal grammar, tashawur, which means mutual consultation. Again, it's not an order being handed down from a boss to an employee. It is a mandatory two-way process. Making decisions within the marriage isn't one-sided at all. By using tashawur, the text makes it crystal clear that discussing, consulting, and arriving at a shared conclusion is the prescribed standard. It completely dismantles the whole idea of one person enforcing decisions on the other. Which brings us to section 3, affection and shared joy, the emotional ideal. The relationship between a husband and a wife in this text is discussed in incredibly warm, affectionate terms. Chapter 30, verse 21 states that you may dwell in tranquility with them, and he has put love and mercy between your hearts. This is absolutely crucial. The foundation outlined here isn't one of strict contractual obligation or forced submission. It's explicitly stated to be love and mercy. You literally cannot force love. You can't force tranquility. These are organic, emotional states that only exist where there is mutual consent and absolute respect. And this brilliantly illustrates that intimacy and equality. Read this line from chapter 2, verse 187. "They are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them." This is such a beautiful visual metaphor. Think about what a garment actually does. It provides closeness, it provides warmth, and it provides protection. And notice the phrasing too. It is perfectly reciprocal. It doesn't say one is the master and one is the garment. No, they are garments for each other. It implies this profound closeness and mutual reliance that completely contradicts any notion of force. We see this emotional ideal reinforced again in chapter 25, verse 74, which describes believers saying, "Our Lord, let our spouses and children be a source of joy for us." The text is framing the family unit, starting right with the spouses, as a shared source of joy. If a marriage is initiated by force or maintained without mutual consent, it logically just cannot be the source of joy that the text explicitly sets as the standard. It just doesn't work. Now let's look at section 4, practical matters, dowries and finances.
Because, let's be real, money is often where the reality of power dynamics truly reveals itself.
In the Quran, there's a pre-marriage requirement for a male to give the female a dower or dowry, but look really closely at chapter 4, verse 4, and give the women their due dowries willingly, and if they remit any of it to you of their own will, then you may take it with good feelings. The text places the financial decision-making squarely in the hands of the woman. She must receive it, but if she chooses to give any of it back, it must strictly be of her own will. Force, coercion, or family pressure is given absolutely zero space here. This financial autonomy is further reinforced in chapter 4, verse 24. It says, "You will incur no sin if, after having agreed upon this lawful due, you freely agree with one another upon anything else." So even if the financial agreements need to be modified after the fact, the text demands that both parties freely agree with one another. Whether it's entering the marriage, reconciling after a separation, or modifying financial contracts, the consistent, unbroken requirement in the source material is free mutual agreement. Which leads us perfectly to this summarizing principle from chapter 42, verse 38. It reminds the reader that believers are those who conduct their matters by mutual consultation. This right here is the overarching rule of the text. Notice it doesn't say some matters, it says their matters. That includes the deeply personal matters of marriage, divorce, and family life. The whole shebang must be driven by mutual counsel.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question. How does separating cultural myths from actual source texts alter our understanding? We started this explainer looking at a pervasive assumption that forced marriage is somehow permitted or that consent isn't strictly required. But by going directly into the source material, we've seen a completely different reality. We've seen a text that explicitly outlaws force, demands mutual agreement, literally uses reciprocal grammar, and defines marriage through love, mercy, and mutual consultation. It really challenges us to ask, how many other things do we assume about a topic simply because we haven't taken the time to look directly at the text itself? Think about that as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely can't wait to dive into our next topic with you soon.